All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started, everyone. How is the volume? Can you hear me in the back? Okay, I see some thumbs up. Okay, awesome. So thank you for joining us this afternoon for breakout session 3B on preparing the next generation for professional pathways in water, approaches, partnerships, and lessons learned. So my name is Avery Davis, and I'm a program manager with the Syracuse University Environmental Finance Center, and I will be your co-moderator today alongside Dr. Erin Ninokawa.
I'm an assistant professor in the chemistry department here at ESF. My work sort of sits right on the boundary between environmental chemistry and marine and freshwater biology.
Thank you, Erin. So we structured this 90-minute session today around a series of short presentations and a panel discussion that is intended to bring together different perspectives across utility operations, community science, interdisciplinary research, nonprofit leaders, and students themselves so that we can hear all the different perspectives and pathways that can help lead our young people into water resource careers, but also to encourage water stewardship more generally. So at this core, this session is about the growing need for interdisciplinary collaboration in water resources. And we know that water quality work today spans everything from lab science and monitoring to public engagement and social science research and utility operations and community science. So there's a lot of things that are covered in the world of water resources. And we know as our water resource challenges become more complex, that the skills we need to address them are going to become more diverse as well. So throughout today's session, we're going to be exploring one central framing question, and that is, how can we use interdisciplinary partnerships, community science, and hands-on learning to better train students and get them excited about the full spectrum of careers in water resources? So you'll hear examples today from utility internship programs, community water quality monitoring initiatives, and other collaborative efforts that are helping students develop professional skills, engage directly with our communities, and better understand the real water resource challenges going on in New York State. But before we jump into our session overview, Erin and I want to give a quick introduction to the programs that inspired this session. So up first, I'll speak to the Syracuse University Environmental Finance Center, where my work is based. And for more than 30 years now, our EPA-designated EFC, we call it, has worked closely with municipal water and wastewater utilities to help them advance their infrastructure projects, develop their staff, and build their technical, managerial, and financial capacity. So today, for our utility perspective, we've invited representatives from two student internship programs that we work on. And the first is the Future Water Leaders program, which is delivered in partnership with the National Environmental Finance Center Network, as well as the New York Water Environment Association's Work in Water program. And that program really centers on giving both utilities and educators the resources they need to get students into water-related careers. And this program focused particularly on getting high school students directly in utility internship programs. And then the second program is the Syracuse University Water Climate Challenge. This is a college student-directed internship program that aims to pair students across disciplines with a municipal utility partner to help them work on community-based projects that explore water infrastructure alongside science communication. So that is what I am bringing to this session. Up next, Erin.
Yeah, and so then the project that I'm here representing is SHARCS, the sampling for healthy aquatic resources with community support. So this was anybody here collect samples for that? Okay, yeah, we have a few people that helped out with that. Thank you all very much. The data are going to be out soon, so it's on its way. But this was a big initiative to try to sample waters throughout central New York, get a baseline understanding of just what water quality is like. There's a lot of data sources out there. We're just hoping to try to fill in the gaps. But there was the part of this that involves the students is training in actually doing a lot of these analyses, training in interdisciplinary research. And so we have some speakers that will talk to those aspects here, and then also working with community organizations, and we have a few speakers that are going to be able to touch on those as well. So I think I'm going to sit down now.
Thank you, Aaron. All right, so this is a really quick overview of our session for today. I'm going to round out our first portion here in a moment by setting the stage with some challenges and opportunities that we're seeing in the world of water resources, particularly around workforce development. And then we'll briefly ask our panelists to introduce themselves afterwards and answer an introductory question that we prepared for them. And then afterwards, we'll jump into our first presentation. But before we get to introductions, I need you to hold on just a second longer. We'll end with a panel discussion, as I might have said. Hopefully, we're hoping for 30 minutes. And we might just jump straight into your questions too, depending on how things go. But before that, I want to set the stage. So I want to zoom out. So my background is primarily with our municipal water and wastewater utilities. And one of the most pressing challenges we are seeing is a growing wave of retirements. And we know that according to the US EPA, more than 1/3 of the nation's drinking water and wastewater system operators are expected to become eligible for retirement within the next decade. And that's going to leave an estimated 10,000 job openings for water and wastewater treatment plant operators every year throughout 2034. So that is annual, 10,000 positions annually. And that's a major challenge, major challenge. And we need to do a better job at raising awareness with our young people of these job opportunities. But I want to zoom out a little further, because we know that utilities are one of the nation's leading water workforce employers, but they are only one piece of this water workforce ecosystem that we're talking about today. So the research from the Brookings Institute, it's their Renewing the Water Workforce report, and I've linked it at the bottom of the slides here. Excuse me. So they highlight that water careers span a wide range of industries, including both the public and private sectors, and that spans areas like stormwater management, wastewater infrastructure, green infrastructure, watershed work, restoration, construction and trades, septic systems, consulting, research. There's really so many roles that encompass the water workforce. And within that report alone, Brookings identified more than 212 unique water occupations. And that includes many of the roles that we immediately think of, like our engineers, our lab staff, our maintenance personnel, but also a much wider range of careers tied to planning, construction, finance, compliance. There's really a wide range of opportunity here. Now, some of these jobs are highly technical, they might be field-based, while others focus more on research, on education, on regulatory compliance, or helping our communities better understand and respond to the water challenges that they're experiencing on the ground. And increasingly, protecting our water resources really depends on people who can work across disciplines in order to connect both this technical expertise with that community-facing work. And that requires a variety of skills. So when I started preparing for this session, I was combing through a bunch of different job posting across some of the groups I mentioned already, our nonprofits, our utilities. I really wanted to see what skills they were looking for in these postings. And so I put together a big list, and then I generated this word cloud. And you'll see here, and this comes from our utilities, nonprofits, consulting firms, environmental groups. And I think what stood out for me was how broad the skill sets they were really looking for in these roles. So you'll see here technical skills, things like sampling, things like your GIS, your asset management. But you'll also see communication, outreach, project management, emotional intelligence, all sorts of soft skills that we don't normally think of when we're preparing ourselves for these roles. And I think that's important context for today's conversation, because preparing students for these careers is not just about learning one discipline anymore, learning one technical discipline. It's increasingly about helping students build adaptable skills and work across disciplines and really understand how the technical, environmental, and community-facing work all come together. So on that note, I would like to introduce our panelists for today and the three perspectives that they represent. So first, we're going to hear about a utility internship program and what it looks like to connect students with hands-on utility operations. Second, we'll hear about community-based water quality monitoring through the SHARCS program and related research efforts here at ESF. And then finally, we'll hear directly from a couple of the students themselves who participated in these programs, hear what it looked like from their perspective, what skills were developed, what challenges they faced, and ultimately how this experience shaped their view of the water sector. So on that note, I'm going to ask each of my panelists to briefly introduce themselves in a moment and answer an opening question that we prepared, which is, how or why did you first get involved or interested in water resources? And up first, I'm going to go to Angel French.
Hi, I'm Angel French. I'm the chief wastewater operator at the City of Watertown pollution control facility. And how or why did I first get into water resource recovery? I fell into wastewater and absolutely loved it. There's nothing about wastewater I don't love. Okay, one thing. Smell can be a little offsetting, but other than that, I have environmental concerns. I'm providing natural resources. I'm recovering all the natural resources. And it's a full circle. So wastewater is where it's at.
Up next, we have Patrick Lynch.
Hi, Patrick Lynch. I'm now the director of the Central New York Land Trust as of a year ago. Prior to that, worked with Avery and the team at the EFC. My background is in nonprofit management. I started as an unpaid intern on the Hudson with a group called Riverkeeper. Those that were in the last session heard Chris talk about Lake George Waterkeeper. It's a beautiful global movement that started with a group of fishermen on the Hudson. I had a couple key moments there as that unpaid intern many years ago, paddling with donors on the Hudson, going to Mountain Jam and getting a banjo lesson from Pete Seeger's friend, Pete, other Pete, and just seeing the work that they do, which is very interdisciplinary. And I love that approach to having law and science and policy and communications all at the same nonprofit level, working across different communities. So that was my hook, and I've done it ever since. So
Thank you, Patrick. Next up, we have Jamie Shin, Dr. Jamie Shin, I should say.
Hi, everybody. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Environmental Studies. I believe my formal title is actually Professor of Water Policy Governance. So that tells you something about my interest. And I think I could answer this question like personally or professionally, right? Like probably all of us, I just grew up on water, around water, right? Like I spend my free time around water. I like to say both frozen and melted, right? Like it's snow or in the summer. So that's part of it for me is just a personal love of being in water-based landscapes. Professionally, my research is really anchored around the idea of climate adaptation and kind of community responses to and recovery from climate events. And that usually involves water, right? Either too much water or not enough water or some variation right thereof in between those things. Most of my work now is around flooding. And so I can't talk about climate and responses to climate stuff about water.
Thank you, Jamie. Up next, we have Dr. Jennifer Goff.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Goff. I'm an assistant professor in the chemistry department here at SUNY ESF. I'm an environmental microbiologist, and my work is really thinking about how disturbance in the environment of all types impacts the microbial communities living in that system and their activities, especially as it relates to the various ecosystem services that microorganisms perform. In terms of how I got interested in water, I didn't grow up next to water. I'm from Georgia originally. There's no natural lakes there, and we're also very limited in terms of like really charismatic water bodies in general. I grew up like very inland, so honestly, water was not really something that was, on my dashboard, so to say, for like quite some time. But then during my postdoc, I did start doing groundwater research, thinking about kind of industrial contamination in groundwater. But then what I think really got me excited about water research, though, was when I moved to central New York. And as I said, I grew up in a place that we didn't have a lot of exciting bodies of water. But I came up here and there's all these beautiful lakes and waterfalls and just seeing like the passion of the people here for their bodies of water, and also going and experiencing those bodies of water themselves really made me excited to get involved in that research and to see how I can also contribute to those efforts to protect our water resources.
Thank you, Jennifer. Now moving on to our former student participants. We'll start with August.
Yeah, mine is gonna be much shorter. I just recently graduated, sorry, my name's August Said. I just recently graduated from the Environmental Studies Policy Planning and Law concentration here at USF. And as for why I'm interested in water, I'm from Rhode Island and that's where I grew up. So I've kind of always been a part of my life. But it wasn't until I came here and actually took Dr. Shen's water time study class where I really became interested in our relationship with water and how important it is for it to be protected.
I take August and say that.
All right, then last but not least, over to Alice.
Hi, I'm Alice McKelly, and I just graduated Syracuse University for environmental engineering. And I got into water kind of accidentally during the summer of my sophomore year. I started working out west on Native American reservations, doing a lot of drinking water and wastewater construction facility inspections. I didn't know it was going to be so water-based, but I was so happy that it was, because I have not considered doing anything else with my life since. Yeah, so that was really it.
Awesome, thank you, Alice. And I think on that note, we're on to our first presentation. Angel French, you are up.
So I'm glad to be here. The getting the youth engaged has been a very important thing in my career. I told you I fell into wastewater and loved it. So, kind of. I stumbled into my career. I didn't know this career existed. I had a whole life before water. I didn't join the water industry until I was 30. So getting the youth engaged and actually having them come into our facility has been so eye-opening. We've seen so many people's eyes changed about what we do as wastewater, water resource recovery. Much better way of saying that. So we have a couple different internships. City of Watertown started their college internship in 2018. And then we partnered with New York Water Environment Association in 2021-ish era, where we had high schools internships where they would come and work 4.5 weeks or so in our facility, and they would work through every part of our facility. We have lab work, we have sampling, we have operations, we have solids handling, we have maintenance. And just this last year, we have incorporated those high school interns to actually work at the filtration plant too. So not only do they get to see the clean side and the dirty side. So it's kind of been a lot of full circles. The goals for all the internships, some of these kids, it's their first job ever. So they don't even know how to interact with other professionals. So that's a huge step in it. Having it be a short summer job helps with that. They get to learn about new careers. We'll talk about one of my success stories that she really didn't even know this career existed. Not many high schoolers do. They learn project experience. Every single intern that we have, they have a project that they have to do, whether it's the college internship or the high school internship. The college internship, whatever their field is that they fancy, they get to do a study. We've had them study our effluent against the body of water that we're going to. We've had them study different media in our biological treatment. This year, they're going to look at allowable headworks, so limits coming into our facility. So they really have a lot of learning that they can do while they're in the internship. The high schoolers, I don't really put so much emphasis on overall project. They just have to actually understand what we do at the facility and how we help the environment. Why do we need to engage our younger generations? Well, we already really talked about that. Is because most of the workforce is gone. Unfortunately, most of my workforce is already gone. When I started at the wastewater plant, 80% of my crew had 20 years experience. Currently today, 80% of my crew have less than 10 years experience. So I've already hit that wave and it hurts. Especially having a third of my crew as trainees and being a large wastewater facility, it's taken a lot of toll on us. So how do we actually engage the high school, the youth themselves? I do take your daughter to work day, but other ways to do it is I've reached out to high school. I have the Watertown High School, they'll come and do a tour. Their chemistry class just came and did a tour. I had a really amazing tour. It was my best tour ever with the community college right next door. Their environmental geology class the instructor came about 4 months prior to the tour, and she did a tour and tailored her program so she could cover everything that their class goes over prior to them coming to do a tour. So that was the most engaging tour I had with a college class. So that was really great. We go to career fairs. Tomorrow we're gonna go to the career fair where there's 20 high schools that come to one area, and we set up a booth so that they can actually see what we're doing. Any outreach program, career jams. But why am I so involved? I already told you it's because I've already hit that wave and it hurts. I stumbled into my career. It shouldn't be that way. People should want to work in water. This is an amazing field. But what does the municipality get out of it? What do I get out of it as the chief operator? I get returnees. I've had people come and do tours that have applied for the job. I've hired them. It gives my crew leadership opportunities also. While they're mentoring these interns, they get to learn. They get to learn some time management and patience also, because sometimes high schoolers are not the funnest to deal with. And working in a wastewater field, they're not really public outgoing people. They like to stay behind the fence, but this gives them time to grow professionally also. Success stories and what they get their first job, they gain confidence, earn money, experiences, and they'll tell their families and friends. This was my very first work in water. I had NIWEA come to me, New York Water Environment Association, come to me and say, hey, you're pretty loud and outgoing. Can you get a high schooler to want to do your job? I was like, okay, I'll try. So what do? I go to the cheerleading team and find one of the flyers, and I'm like, hey, come work in wastewater. So she does. And she absolutely loved it. She was like, this is nothing like what I thought. So I say, okay, bye. A couple years later, she's at Clarkson University, and she's like, I would love to do the college internship also. And she did, and she came back. Currently, she is applying for the environmental laboratory positions. So she has told me that this was her favorite job ever. So there is a lot of success stories if you can get them in the door. How have I found the interns? High school guidance counselors, I email them. I email everybody, every high school around me, even if I don't know who they are. Colleges, word of mouth. A lot of my interns have come from somebody else that has worked in the field or their friends. That my first high school intern, she brought back her sister to take a tour of the facility just because of how cool her job was. So there's a lot of things that just getting them in the door and seeing what we do and seeing our passion and what we can do for them. So, and passion is another way to keep people engaged, and funny pictures and everything else. So I always end my slides with, hey, look at us, we're the Watertown Water Bears. Anyways, does everybody know what a water bear is? Does anybody not know what a water bear is? Okay, good, thank you. Does anybody have anything? We're good?
All kinds of questions.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
sounds great.
And up next, we have Patrick Lynch from the Central New York Land Trust.
God, so I had to take off my vest. I was thinking about the word chart and then the water careers that it's not Brookings Institute, that one. I don't think my job would count as a water job. So I was thinking about it. So again, my name is Patrick Lynch. I work at the Central New York Land Trust. We are a conservation group focused on saving land, but we take a watershed approach. So I think we're probably in the gray area where unless we have somebody who's actually hired as like a hydrologist, it might not count. So I was going to talk about some of our themes. This is our offices. This is the Woodchuck Hill Field and Forest Preserve. It's an old farmhouse, one of the only still agricultural looking areas in Manlius and DeWitt. A feeder creek to Limestone Creek is right in the back there. It's a very unique area. Lots of ESF folks have been out there researching properties over the years, researching plants on the property. So I'm going to talk about our partners, some of the water quality work we're doing with this monitoring program, and then our interest in building up research partnerships with students through paid internships and working with faculty. So this is my background. I grew up in Ipswich watershed, which is north of Boston. It's a small coastal waterway. I am not a scientist. I studied economics and law, and then much later went back to get a master's in public administration. So I've been in the nonprofit sector for 15 years, but I always highlight this fact. My first 3 jobs were all unpaid. And I'm glad that we've turned the corner where we now offer paid internships, because having the hustle to find fellowships and sleeping on friends' couches to do these internships was, I did it, but I'm glad that people today don't have to. I've been here for 4 years, so I'm relatively new to Central New York. I think we have a lot of great natural resources. There's obviously a lot of communities interested about what we do. I also think because of ESF and SU and Colgate and the other universities here, there's a huge opportunity for us to recruit young people that want to work in conservation and water and keep you here so that you don't have to leave to go build your careers and come back. And again, I've been at the Land Trust for 1 year. Oh, and this is the site. I've lived in Patagonia for 8 years, where I worked for the Waterkeeper Alliance with the Riverkeeper. This was a proposed dam site. This is the Baca River. It's tremendously beautiful. It is now a national park because they won on the dams. So if you ever want to talk about Patagonia and working down there, let me know. It's a weird part of my life. So this is our current service area where we work. We originally started as Save the County back in the 1970s, saving Baltimore Woods, Old Fly Marsh, Camillus Valley Natural Area. These were all sort of the first attempts to save local areas at the nonprofit private level. We were actually started by a group of ESF students and faculty. So we started our origin stories right here. Building looked a lot different in the 70s. So all of these trees represent our preserves. 18 of them are open to the public, so they have trails and parking. The rest of them are all open for research. They're not, there's no trail access, but we can get you in there. So I know I've talked with Professor Ninakawa about scuba diving at one of our preserves in a creek. We're working across 21 municipalities. We have 3 new ones we're looking to open up in the next year or 2. Since we're a nonprofit, a lot of that depends on grant funding and finding private donors that want to help us do things like pay for a parking lot. Some of my favorite ones, this is Carpenter Pond in Pompey. It actually drains south into the upper Susquehanna. Most of our preserves drain north into the Great Lakes. Really cool spot. I know Don Leopold's been out there with other folks looking at possibly extirpated rare orchids that they could bring back there. So it's an interesting research site. This is the spot where Aaron's going to go scuba diving. This is the new Polymons Preserve donated by a woman who did a lot of conservation in Cazenovia.
for many years. And then when she passed, she gave us her property in her will. So this is 95 acres of floodplain on Limestone Creek. It's a really tremendously beautiful area. Very few people have ever been there, unless they've been fishing off the bridge, if they're local and they know it's a good fishing spot. So we're looking at announcing hopefully 2 grants soon where we'll be able to fund public education and outreach, working with folks like the Manlius Watershed Stewards, the Young Naturalist Program, ESF, to get more people to the preserve and teach them about the importance of conserving floodplains, which as somebody who likes to kayak, that's a great spot to go paddle to. So opening it up for recreation would be a nice opportunity for us to have a co-benefit. And then the Pleasant Valley Preserve, who's been to Pleasant Valley before? Anybody? We got 1, 2, 3. Okay, there. Thank you, August. It's a great spot to check out. Used to be a Christmas tree farm. You can see some of the Christmas trees that are still being sold off. They carved a trail in the shape of a bird. This is actually a feeder into Onondaga Creek, so it's really important for the work that we want to be doing to support Native sovereignty with Onondaga Nation, to be building out opportunities to do restoration work there. We also work with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service there, so our summer interns will be spending a lot of time at Pleasant Valley. I like how everybody has their partnership slides in these presentations. These are the partners we've worked with in the last year. A lot of universities, a lot of nonprofits, Finger Lakes Institute on Invasives Research, fellow land trusts, Finger Lakes Land Trust, Casanova Preservation Foundation, the Nature Conservancy. I'll be showing a cool map from them, and I think Olivia's here. So we've been, basically when I started, I asked people for advice. It's something I've done my whole career. For those of you who are early career, anytime you get an internship, paid or unpaid, find your mentors, ask people what you could do better. People want to help. We generally like to do mentorship when we can. And then the SHARCS program. So this is a really fun partnership for us. We're really focused on community engagement, building membership, teaching people about the important resources we have in Central New York. So we got invited to go to the New York State Fair and table with the Department of Chemistry for a day, which was really exciting. And then we had folks from SHARCS come to our annual dinner, which we'll be doing this year downtown in Syracuse, again, just to sort of amplify the public interest and knowledge about what we're doing. And we use our preserves as the pickup stations and the drop-off. So I know you'll be talking more about the actual program. And then you can see our 2 summer paid interns, the bottom right. That was their last day of work on the job last summer, was tabling at the State Fair. Our most recent volunteer opportunity where we had lots of folks come in about water quality was a tree planting in Skinny Atlas. So there's a couple of state programs that allow you to actually purchase property like old farms, put it into conservation if it's draining into a public drinking water supply. I think most people around here know that the drinking water mostly comes from Skinny Atlas Lake in this area, also Otisco Lake. So we were able to buy a 140-acre farm, take it out of farming, which we're doing gradually, and we've started planting trees. So we got another DEC grant from the state to plant 5,000 trees. And there's a video, and this is our new stewardship manager who we hired, who just graduated from ESF. So we're excited to be able to grow our team. And if I could just click it once. Oh, there we go. Okay. Gonna try to show a 1-minute video. Yeah. Those are all of our partners. It was a lot for us to do. We're a small nonprofit with 4 staff and like 180 volunteers. So we had 160 people came out on that one day. We're hoping to recruit them all as members. And then when we start to talk to them about things like
We'd like to hire more interns, that they will support those types of programs. The last thing I'll mention on the water quality monitoring and where we kind of find our nexus in with land conservation and water, is that over the last year, we've been enlisting the support of free technical assistance from the Nature Conservancy, to help us identify priority areas within the watershed. So looking primarily at the Great Lakes, important wetlands, priority creeks where we think more conservation needs to happen. A couple of weeks ago, we did a workshop that TNC organized with us at our offices, and we had several faculty from ESF come, Professor Shim, Professor Ninakawa, and others. And it was a great opportunity for us to lean into their expertise and also just curiosity as researchers into areas that they think we should be putting on our list of priorities. So as we start to grow and hire more staff, I'm hopeful that it'll be science-based, even though I'm a non-scientist. We do have one scientist on staff now. And it's just a great opportunity again for us to build that connection between land and water, which I think is so important. Including we need to do better talking about our wastewater directors and how important they are. So as somebody who used to get to work with all the wastewater directors. So my final point is just, it takes a village to do this work. It really is a community effort. We work across 21 communities. There's a lot of conflicting interests and needs with all of those communities. So working around common goals is really important for us. For us, what we found is communities, they're interested in the science, but what they really want is access to nature. They're looking for activities at our preserves, ways to engage, especially younger generations and older generations. So there's some retirement communities we're working with now to get their folks out to the preserves. And then with some of these grants, looking at education with the schools and the libraries. And they want interesting stories. So that's why we're starting to do more film work and just to, again, share this idea that Central New York is actually a really beautiful area to live in. And if you can find jobs, you should stay. So I will leave that. Oh, and just internships. We're looking to build up more paid internships. We have two started this week. Please stay in touch. If you're early career, you want to work with us, we need help. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. And up next, we have Dr. Jamie Shin. Oh, sorry. I want to be called Jamie.
Slide.
Yeah.
Should I?
Yeah, both of them. Just stay seated, whatever, however goes best.
Can you hear me in the back? Is that okay? Okay, I'm just gonna stay seated. Sorry, I don't have slides for you. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the social science component that we integrated into SHARCS. But before I do that, I'd like to just kind of zoom out and think about why a social science perspective is important in these interdisciplinary projects. And hopefully trying to connect to some of what we've heard already. And so I think we don't have to all be social scientists to have a social science perspective that we could integrate into our work, right? And I think by doing that, what social science does is it helps us put water into context. So it's really important to know what the microbial content of water is, what's the water quality, how does water flow, across the landscape. All of these questions are super important, and social scientists can help us then kind of ground those and why that might matter for communities, for certain members of communities in ways that might be different from others. In my classes, I often talk about the hydrosocial cycle. So you all know the water cycle, right? You've all learned about it, but has anybody ever heard of the hydrosocial cycle? Okay, if you took my class, raising your hand, so that's good. Should I call on one of them? But if we think about the water cycle and we interject into that all of the human components, right? Water doesn't just flow, right? It doesn't just fall from the sky and flow to the ocean and then evaporate back up, right? There's infrastructure, there's use, there's us in that landscape. And we are not just happenstance. We are making really concrete decisions about how that water flows. And those are often political decisions, right? They're made by people in power. Maybe they're outdated, right? Maybe we're dealing with like infrastructure that is past its lifespan. And all of that matters in terms of the type of water people have access to, how something like flood mitigation works. So if we can take that broader social science perspective, the water cycle is all still there, all those processes, but we can interrupt that a little bit or kind of think about more holistically by placing people in it and the decisions people make all of the time. So that's what I'm always trying to instill in students. And then if they go work for a utility, they're thinking about that, right? It's not just about infrastructure or wastewater, right? But that those things are in a context that have social ecological factors tied to them. So I think social science matter for that reason. I think it also can help us understand who's making decisions about the ways that we experience this water cycle, right? Not all experiences with water are equal. And so why are some communities flooding more than others? Statistically, we know that poorer communities are going to flood more often and they're going to have a harder time recovering. That's not just happenstance, right? That might be tied to long histories of things like redlining or other segregation issues or others, right? And so can we use our social science brains to think through why some people are having these experiences than others? I mean, we can think about the lead crisis here in Syracuse, or in Flint, or in so many post-industrial cities across this country, of why are certain people's waters polluted but not others? So those are the kinds of things I'm always trying to get students to think about that I would hope they would bring forward into their careers. And lastly, I think social science can bring more people to the table, right? So I'm always in these spaces. I mean, I said to Patrick, right, when we were at the office a couple of weeks ago, who's not here, right? And that workshop was so well designed and the people there were really intentionally selected. So that's not to throw shade in any way, right? But just thinking about like, who's at the table? Why are they at the table? Who's not there? Why are they not there? Right. And I think social science can help us think through not only who's there and who's not there, but why and how we might engage a little bit more holistically. So for instance, in Syracuse, are we engaging both Onondaga and the South Side homes that have recently been redrawn into a floodplain and now need to carry flood insurance, right? They're part of that same system. And how are we getting them around the same table to talk about shared values, competing values, right? To think holistically about how we might manage the system for all these people. And I think there are really good people who are thinking about this, by the way. I don't think like this is non-existent here in the watershed, but I think it's a really important point to elevate. Okay, so this work is really hard, right? What are the challenges to this? We all have limited time and capacity. We all have our own interests. And I'm not saying that each of you should go back to school and get a social science degree. Just like I don't have a degree in hydrology, right? But I talk about like flood models all the time. And so I think it's about taking enough time to learn from each other, to listen, to learn each other's languages. So for instance, I was thinking back, like what's my own journey with this? In grad school, I weaseled my way into a couple of like watershed ecology classes or wetland ecology classes. And I was like not the exemplary student in those classes, but they like allowed me to play along, right? And then if I carry forward into flood work from a social science perspective, I have enough working knowledge of those to at least engage in conversations, right? And I think that's a two-way thing. So hopefully what SHARCS has done, and August can tell me if this is true or not, is help students have those conversations that are kind of time consuming and a little bit challenging sometimes, to learn each other's language and to learn why our expertise might be valuable, right, in this kind of two-way direction, and really kind of opening up space and time for that. And appreciating that work, right? I think increasingly, I think for a long time, social scientists had to like prove that we were like also doing rigorous work. I think that's less and less an issue, right? Like, I was like, hey, Aaron, what if we have people take photos as part of the SHARCS thing? And he was like, yeah, we should totally do that. And I was like, okay, now we have to do that. Right. But I think this like idea that we can value each other's expertise and approaches, see that as rigorous, even if it's not what we're doing, and exposing students to that, I think is really important. But it's also hard, right? So it takes a lot of time. It may not always be comfortable. And so, but also those are important skills to develop. But I do think it can really help students to learn some really important skills as they go out into the workforce, to have had those conversations, to have learned other expertise and languages, to learn to appreciate those, so that when they're engaging with people in their own sectors, right, they kind of have that skill set developed. So ideally, that's part of what we're doing with SHARCS. And so with the SHARCS project, students did a lot of analyses that Jennifer can talk about and August can talk about, But they also, as part of the water sampling, and you know this if you took one of the samples, we asked people to take a photo of the water they sampled and fill out a short survey, kind of about like why they took that photo, why they took the sample where they did. And we were trying to get at is like, how do people value this water? So if I agree to be a part of the citizen science project, it means something to me, right? And that helps put the analyses that Jennifer and Erin helped lead into a context, right? Of like why this water is important, why are people concerned, why do they love it? And maybe August will speak to some of the themes that emerged, I'm not sure, but that will be part of the results we put forward. It's not just the results of the analysis, but also this kind of more social perspective on why this might matter to people. And so to do this in SHARCS, we really let the students run with it. And it wasn't meant to be easy. We were not trying to hand them a project. We were like, do this and this and make it work. We were kind of like, you guys have to figure this out. It was meant to be a little tricky and a little bit muddy, right? But they did it and it was great. We're still working on it, but we'll get there soon, the end, I think. But really having students, no one student did equally the water quality analyses and the social science component. So August took lead on the social science component, but was also in the labs doing analyses, right? And that might not have been August's interest, they right, say more about this, but it at least exposed the students to both sides and think and work together and think kind of creatively. And if you go see the student poster that's hanging in the poster section, you'll get a sense for what that looked like for them. So hopefully that was valuable for them. I think it was useful for me just to kind of watch that. So that's the type of training I think we can do. And SHARCS is one example of that. And so it wasn't only about citizen science, but really bringing students to these interdisciplinary spaces. So I think I'll stop there.
Got it?
Yeah. All right, so I'm here to kind of continue the discussion about SHARCS and doing interdisciplinary research. So as I said, I am an environmental microbiologist, and sort of my pickup line for initiating collaborations is kind of like, have you thought about your research, but with microbiology? And that's, that's how it goes a lot of the time. But so before I get started talking about this, Erin had asked me to talk about a couple of things, which is like, why is microbiology research important for water quality? My experiences with interdisciplinary collaborations, how do we train students in that area? And then like, what are challenges, which it's a pretty broad range of topics that I have to squeeze into 8 to 10 minutes. So hopefully we'll get at least some high level coverage. But first, like, why environmental microbiology? Why do we care about sort of the microbial community that's present in water? There's both good and bad reasons. I will say I put this slide together last night when my brain was very tired, so I definitely thought of more reasons since then. But the good of it is things like nutrient cycling. So for example, our carbon cycle, our nitrogen cycle, phosphorus cycle, sulfur cycle, right? All those cycles are pretty largely driven by microbial activities. And then sort of embedded within that larger umbrella of nutrient cycling, we can think about other important microbial activities like degradation of organic pollutants, for example. Within that, right, like wastewater treatment. So that all sort of falls within that larger bucket of nutrient cycling. But then there's sort of not desirable things about environmental microorganisms as well. They contribute quite a bit to sort of natural emissions of greenhouse gases. So like methane, nitrous oxide, carbon dioxide, those all have microbial sources. Harmful algal blooms, which we've talked about quite a bit in this conference. And then, for a lot of human pathogens, a lot of them do have a significant environmental reservoir, and the environment can be a place where these pathogens can be disseminated and can also sort of evolve and do things like pick up antibiotic resistance genes and become more virulent. So there's both good and bad reasons within the context of water quality of why we would care about environmental microorganisms. And so if we think about sort of microbiology and water quality research and like, how do we do it? One of the big questions that we would approach this with is like, who is there and maybe like, what are they doing? So there's a couple different ways that we can approach looking at who is there. The one that we actually did, well, okay, I'll talk about the one we actually did in SHARCS in a second, but we can take a water sample and we can directly culture microorganisms from it to do things like count like how many different organisms did we get in order to like estimate microbial densities. We can test them for antibiotic resistance as well. And this is still a very valid method, right, of sort of examining sort of the microbial population that's present and its density, and skills that our students are going to need for that include things like aseptic technique, and then also just general experience with microbiological culturing and testing in the laboratory. But then what we did with SHARCS actually was we took a culturing free approach. So instead of trying to isolate, every bacteria that's maybe in that water sample, instead we just extracted all the DNA that was present in the water sample and we sequenced it. So that's like a whole different set of skills that you need. Students need to be able to know how to do DNA extractions, how to do PCR, how to do bioinformatics. So already we are asking for a pretty broad range of skills in order to be able to study microorganisms living in aquatic environments. However, in the field of microbiology, there's this concept of the microbiota and then the microbiome. So the microbiota is just literally like, who is living there? Like, what is the microbial community composition? And that's what we figure out through the methods that we just talked about on the last slide. But microorganisms, they don't just exist in a vacuum, they exist in their environmental context. And that's what we mean when we say the microbiome. That is going to be our microbiota plus their environment. So that's like the physical aspects of their environment, the chemical aspects of their environment, the societal aspects of their environment. So it's all this additional environmental context. And then, each system has its own unique environmental context. And so, that starts to begin to reach into a whole bunch of different fields that like I don't have, any formal background or training in. So, when I was a graduate student, I was like a very insular researcher. I was like, I want to just hang out by myself in the lab, doing my little experiments. I mean, even predating that, I remember when I was an undergrad, we'd get assigned group projects and I'd go and ask the professor if I could just work by myself. So I was like very much like, no, I want to chill on my own island, and like I'm not one for engaging with other people or working collaboratively with other people. But then, before I started my postdoc at the University of Georgia, I had a meeting with my future postdoc advisor on Zoom because he was trying to convince me to join his lab. And he was giving me this overview presentation of all the different research projects he had going on in his lab. And it was like very broad. And at the end of it, I was like, Mike, like, how do you do all this different stuff? Like, how does one person have, projects in all these very different areas? And he told me, he was like, well, it's not me. It's actually all of my collaborators. They're really the ones who make the magic happen. I really draw on their specific expertise across a whole range of different fields. And, I'm a very minimal contributor, which he's kind of underselling himself. Of course, he's the one who kind of brings together all of those collaborations and sort of has the idea and sort of integrates all of that. But that was a lesson that really stuck with me. And it's something that I started to learn about a lot during my postdoc. And while, I went in with the idea that like, oh, being collaborative and working with people, that's something that's just, you inherently can do it or you inherently can't do it. I ended up changing my mind about that because I kind of realized like, no, this is just a skill like any other skill that we learn. We just have to go and practice that skill if maybe we're not natural at it right away. And so that's something that I did start practicing during my postdoc. And then, of course, it served me well in my career as a faculty member because now I'm part of a lot of really big interdisciplinary projects, including several that I myself lead. And so this is just sort of highlighting, right, all the different academic fields that my research intersects with. So I work with hydrologists, ecologists, environmental chemists, geologists, landscape architects, environmental engineers, social scientists. And then that's not even including various like community partners, land managers, and more. So my life as a researcher has become a lot richer through these collaborations because me as one person, I cannot possibly provide information about the microbiota and then all the various sort of environmental contexts that they live within, but my collaborators can. And so, when I go now and I present on my research, especially like in an audience in front of students, I get asked the question of like, how did you build all of these different collaborations? Like, how do you do that? And it brings us back to a theme that we've heard about over and over again at this meeting, which is really sitting with others in conversation to find commonalities and also just being generally curious about other people. So again, back when I was like a grad student, I had this very kind of cynical attitude towards like networking and stuff. Like I envisioned it as like writing cringy posts on LinkedIn or going up to conferences, I don't know, like in a little suit with my business cards, like, hi, I'm Jennifer, it's nice to meet you. Here's my card, let's talk. But what I came to realize is that, it's not really, I mean, it could be like that, I suppose, but a lot of times it's just more organic interaction. So it can be just randomly running into someone in the hallway and chatting. It could be right at some of these kind of smaller meetings that are more encouraging towards interactions, just sort of chatting over coffee with someone. It could be running into someone on the street and meeting them on the street and being introduced to them and starting to chat and then follow up later. There's just been, I would say some of my most fruitful collaborations have come from these very organic interactions that weren't like these very stiff, like, hello, my name is Jennifer. Would you like to collaborate with me? It was much more organic than that. And I think sort of, as we start to kind of think about like, how do we train students to engage in interdisciplinary research? I think it's helping them to also understand that collaboration and networking, it doesn't have to feel like super formal and business-like. It's really just sort of kind of tending the garden of your connections, if you will, and tending that garden maybe without even any expectations that you're going to get something out of that person immediately. Like it might be something that you never benefit from, or maybe you benefit from it for years later. I remember one colleague of mine, he's an Australian geologist, when he was finishing up his PhD, he sent me an email because I was one of the few other researchers who was doing research in that particular area, and I was studying the biological aspects of that area. And he sent me an email, just a cold email out of the blue, to just ask me some questions about some things he was writing about in his thesis. And I could have ignored that email, but I didn't. I replied back with like a very long message, and we went back and forth, and we've kept in touch over the years. And now years later, he's in his own faculty position, I'm in my own faculty position, and I finally reached out to him and was like, hey, let's collaborate on some proposals, which, we've ended up getting funded. And so that is to say, you can be tending the garden of your interactions with people and your relationships without any expectation of immediate benefit, but you might benefit years down the line. But of course, now, the interesting thing when you become a faculty member is it's no longer just you doing the research, you're like running this lab of students who are also doing research. And so if you want to continue that interdisciplinary research with them, you have to get a little bit of buy-in from them in the process as well. And, Jamie actually talked on a lot of these points, and I ended up writing down a lot of the similar thoughts about challenges with engaging students in interdisciplinary research. So I'll just reiterate them again, and then we can always move back to them later. So I think the first one is kind of an umbrella thing that then some explanations for that come in the next 2 point, which is, resistance from students, right? It's easier to stay in our comfort zone and be like, I am a microbial physiology person. I want to just lock in and work with E. coli. That's it. But, one of the reasons why we might have this resistance to these collaborative efforts is just a lack of experience for the students working in diverse groups. And that was certainly a problem that I had. Collaborating across disciplines requires good communication and teamwork skills, which is still lacking in a lot of our formal educations. But just like exercise or any other skill, right? You just practice it. And as you practice it, it starts to become easier and more natural. And I think encouraging students to practice those skills. So starting off really small, like just encouraging collaboration, like within your own lab, or maybe you're running an internship program and encouraging collaboration that way. Like instead of me teaching a student to do something, I'll be like, oh, so-and-so is really good at that. Go and ask them to show you that. And then starting to build up to like, okay, we're going to go to a small conference like Healthy Waters. And then kind of building up from there. So just like when we start exercising, right, we lift the lighter weights first, and then we start going up to heavier weights. And I think encouraging collaboration and teamwork is the same. Student bandwidth, which Jamie alluded to, working across multiple disciplines requires learning across multiple disciplines, which takes time. So thinking about how can we be efficient with that time? If it's our grad students, how can we help them efficiently pick out coursework? How can we find sort of targeted, like intensive workshops that maybe people can go to? And then finally, and I think this is a systemic problem that kind of contributes to all of the above, which is legacy disciplinary silos. So our graduate and undergraduate curricula are still largely siloed from each other. Like we have a chemistry major, we have a biology major, we have an environmental engineering major. And even when there is overlap between those majors, like a biology student taking organic chemistry, there's not really the emphasis on disciplinary integration there. So that's a big challenge, and that's one that's really hard to overcome, because another thing I've learned after becoming a faculty member is like changing any amount of curricula is so hard for a variety of reasons. So I will leave those thoughts there, and then let August go up.
I'm on. From a student perspective, I think SHARCS was a very fun program to work with. I started it at the beginning of my senior year, so back in October. I was a little unsure about whether I would even have the time to put into learning new things. But honestly, after the first couple of initial meetings with Dr. McCall and Dr. Shen, and some of the other students that were participating in SHARCS, I realized that honestly what most excited me was learning new things, not only just like new things, but also new things in other disciplines. And I think being a transfer student kind of put me at a disadvantage, because I didn't, ESF, like everyone is very sciencey here. I didn't really get that. So SHARCS actually gave me the opportunity to get in the lab and learn laboratory skills. And so that was very important to me. And honestly, the tediousness of acid washing bottles and filtering water samples and logging all that information down, it was nice. I enjoyed it. It was a good break from my other class work, because I was doing law stuff and policy, so it was very different. And seeing it all come together with the social science side, which is what I'm most familiar with, was very rewarding. And I know there's still more to do, and I'm hoping that I graduated, future generations of SHARCS students continue on the path that we have begun. And overall, I think working in different areas within the SHARCS program, because I did, in the lab, I did water analysis, but I also did qualitative coding of the survey responses and the photo voice images. Seeing all of it was just great. And it allowed me to develop a wide variety of skills. And I think most importantly, it showed me the true value of interdisciplinary work. And being a well-rounded person in any career that you go into is very important.
Yes, and last but not least, before we get into questions, we have Alice Capelli. I'm not sure what direction.
All right, so I'm going to be talking about my journey in the water sector so far. A lot of it has been with Avery, and Tess is also here. Or no, not anymore. She was here. Because I've been working with the Center of Excellence for a year and a half, almost two maybe. So most of my journey has been with them. So my introduction, as I talked a little bit about, I have a degree in environmental engineering now. And I also spent a summer in Nevada and California working on water and wastewater. And I really liked the impact on sustainability, infrastructure, and especially the public health aspect of it has really kept me on this path. So the first thing that I came into with the Center of Excellence was basically working with Mount Vernon. And this was really unique because it was a very small, not city, but their water team was very small. So it was very almost intimate getting to work with all of them, mostly on their backflow prevention program that was being set up. A lot of it was focusing on public outreach as well as research. That research was kind of like device info for backflow prevention, putting a lot of that technical language into the easy to understand materials. Obviously, people don't want to hear about pressure and backflow and contamination when they're just trying to hang out at home and getting a mailer about that. And then the other things we focused on were a web page as well as a podcast. And that kind of focused on the communication side of it. So considering like those community dynamics that exist and tailoring all of those materials to Mount Vernon's specific needs, because obviously each municipality is different from the other. And this combination of the technical concepts with the communication skills I found was just absolutely vital when working with municipalities. And I have since, as I've continued my work with the Center of Excellence and worked with different municipalities again, these skills just come up over and over again. And more specifically, I started my journey with the Water Climate Challenge. So before the challenge, I didn't really see where I could do just water. It seemed like it kind of came in and out with environmental engineering. And a lot of it was just very technical. And while I love technical, it was much more exciting to see community-based thinking being an option as well. And so the Water Climate Challenge, really, I was working with people who weren't strictly engineers and who also liked that community-based approach and public health as well. So I saw that there were so many different career paths and skill sets outside of just the technical roles. So from this experience with the Center of Excellence and the EFCN, I will be continuing my passion for water resource engineering. And what excites me the most is getting to continue to work on community projects and community infrastructure and applying the skills I've learned. And I'll be doing that at Arcadis back home in Philadelphia, where I'll be doing private water and sewer infrastructure projects. So, thank you so much.
Right. So at this point of the session, we're hoping to get some questions. So if you have questions for the panelists, we feel free to raise your hand and ask those questions. As people are asking questions, we want this to be a discussion. So if you have answer to somebody else's question, feel free to raise your hand and answer that. If we don't have any that are right immediate, I have some questions that can get us started while you gather your thoughts and get them together. Do we have any questions that we want to start with? Yeah.
So currently I'm an undergraduate here at SHARCS, and I did also have the experience with in from a different college, which I felt didn't necessarily prepare me for my classes here, but better prepare me for interacting with others within this field. So my question is, what is one course that you recommend outside of the science field that you recommend anyone pursuing anything to do with water should take?
Jamie's class. August, but
Yeah,
No
I
pressure.
was, no, that is what I was gonna say. EST 496.
It's now 411, it's got formalized. I teach a class called Water Climate Society. After your certificate, you can also confirm or deny whether or not you should take it, but it's a cross-listed grad, undergrad class. Zach just finished it, and the beautiful thing we had this semester is we've had students from almost every major on campus. And so it allowed us, you know, it's social science class, but it allowed people from engineering and resource management and all this EV come together to really think collaboratively. So I would love to be teaching it in full. It's food for people.
I kind of have a little bit of an answer for myself.
Great.
So for me specifically taking a public speaking course, which isn't necessarily you have to take it for a lot of majors, but having that available where it's put through a constant kind of stress of these different situations, how to prepare for a speech, to congratulate someone, how to carry discussion at some place like a conference. I felt that it better prepared me for this, and that's what I would recommend.
I totally agree.
I agree.
And then you can do that as an e-campus, so it should have a version.
Yeah.
Just to add on to that, that's no Toastmasters is still around. But, when I was an environmental specialist for the New York State DOT, and the director of our region instituted that. And it was one of the best, things that he did, I think, for everyone. And I don't know, I think they had student chapter.
I think there's still some in Syracuse. If you go onto their website, I've went on there to look that up before also.
Yeah, I thought it's open to anyone.
It is.
And it gives you a lot of practice.
I've been recommended that also. So yes, I would say yes.
What is that?
It's a public speaking forum where you get you kind of practice public speaking.
You sign up and there's a whole group of people and they're from all different walks of life.
Yep.
And you take turns critiquing other people's presentations. So you get critiqued too. So you see it from both sides. And I thought it was a great.
I've known people to take it. So yeah.
Public speaking is my worst nightmare, so.
Yeah, Bakery.
Yeah.
First, thank you for, taking time to come up and talk. It was really great to hear all the perspectives. I think my question is related to the practicality of higher education with respect to, the demand for jobs in water, right? That's how the talk started, with all these people that are gonna be leaving and the need for new people to come in and take those jobs. So I'd be curious, like Autumn and Alice, did your experiences at ESF and SU prepare you for these like real internships that you had from the perspective of people who are working as professionals, managing these trainees that are coming in? Are you feeling the people coming in with masters, with PhDs as undergrads, do they have the conceptual understanding from all the great classes at ESF and SU? But do they have the practical experience to really jump in? Is what can be done better maybe with the curriculum being offered at ESF and SU to prepare people for these jobs that are and will be needed more going forward?
I think there's a big distinction between if you have a formal degree or going to trade school, which is I think if you want to do the more technical side, the day-to-day operations, like if you want to run that wastewater treatment plant, going to trade school is definitely the better option. I think the formal engineering education lab work is more for like the designing side. And you don't really do as much of the day-to-day operation of the plant. Like you're not the one eating the chemicals or anything like that. So I think there is just a strong distinction between the two, not so much that one isn't helpful for the other or anything like that, but I do think there is a strong distinction in the field, and I think getting people to get the technical training is just a little bit less available, especially with the push for everyone to kind of go get a bachelor's. I think right now, if I could do it over again, I would be very intrigued at going to trade school. I always said if I didn't pass my classes, I'd go into carpentry, but now I think I'd go in and become a wastewater operator.
On the job training.
I guess I have a follow-up to that. So thinking about these different internships, what do each of you see as success, either from the mentors or from the people taking on the employees later on, as the people that are participating? What at the end of it tells you that I was successful in this internship?
There's so many successes. So it's a huge range. So if I can spark anybody's interest in any part of the water field. I've had interns go into engineering, project management, laboratories. So any part to have their interest engaged into our career field, or for them to recommend somebody else to come to me. That's success for me.
Go down the road, while you're everybody.
Yeah.
Right here. I think success for me, like if I left a role, like I'm leaving, we got to the end of the summer. And I think what would make me feel successful is being able to come up with ideas that we came up with at the beginning, and those strategies kind of on my own. Like a lot more individual thinking almost, if that makes sense. And less reliance on the people around you, which, yeah, I don't know how to go into it further than that.
I think there's tangible and not tangible answers, you know, when I think about the SHARCS project, it's like, hopefully we deliver you all a report that shows you an integrated, holistic understanding of your water quality, what it means to you. That would be lovely. But I'm much more interested in what the students did to problem solve, right? And like that skill, which people who worked on the project may not know they developed that skill until they're in a career in 5 years, and they're like, actually, right? Like I've done this a little bit. But maybe we don't know right away, but I think that kind of real-time problem solving, grappling to me is the more important than the shiny report at the end, which we also
Yeah, I mean, obviously in academia there are like the tangible measurable results, which are important. So like presentations, for like undergrad interns, for example, that we'd really like for them to be able to present their research in some forum and have that as sort of something that they can put on like their resumes. Thinking out a little longer term, like, getting students involved in publications as well. I've really found that inclusion of students in the publication process is very affirming for them and their identity as a researcher. But then just all of that aside, and kind of not really actually aside, but just sort of going off of that final point, I think seeing them kind of increase in their confidence as a researcher and sort of having that affirmation that like I can be a researcher, this is the kind of work that I can do, this is the kind of work that I want to continue doing, I think is a very important outcome as well for me.
I'll say for our internships who will hopefully continue working on this project in partnership with the SHARCS program, I have 2 metrics of success. One is if they still want to talk to us afterward and come back and like add us on LinkedIn, use us as references. We had a 50% success rate last summer, so we got to work on that. The other one, I don't know if there's any retired teachers in this room. Are there anybody? We got one. Okay. So there's a really interesting land trust partnership out in Geneseo, the Genesee River Conservancy, and they pulled a database of retired teachers that are collecting state pensions. They wrote them all letters and they said, would you like to sponsor paid student internships during the semester for us to do workforce development at SUNY Geneseo? And they've been funding like dozens of these programs over the years with the philanthropic support of retired teachers who understand education. So that would be one metric for me. It's like, how many retired teachers do I have next year that are helping us to fund to hire SUNY ESF and Clarkson students to do all the work that we need them to do? So, yeah.
For me, success feels like having confidence in your competence and trusting in your education and knowing that you learn stuff.
Cool. Oh, question.
Yeah. You're trying to engage lots of partners in interdisciplinary research, and what can you say about the time it takes to build that in and getting sort of buy-in for that process and that need and that opportunity, and what we should get for facilitators trying to do somewhere engagement.
How do you want to handle it?
Yeah. Yeah. My goal is not talk at all.
And I can
Yeah,
start
yeah, go for
answering it. Yeah, I mean, it is a lot of time and it's like tiring. But I think a big thing is finding very like-minded people who are also excited to collaborate with you and work as part of a large collaborative effort. I mean, some people are just going to be very resistant to that kind of work in general, and so it just might not be your worth your time really to like engage with them. But I think finding like-minded people is really important because they'll also sort of take upon themselves some of the effort to make those partnerships happen. But I think just in terms of like boots on the ground logistics, I think like, just scheduling in like frequent meetings, like every other week or something like that, just to check in, like very open communication, is super important. And that's where I think the buy-in is. Like if everyone sort of bought into this large collaborative thing and they're very excited about the research question as well, they'll show up to those kind of meetings. So I think first is identifying like-minded partners.
Yeah.
Two quick ones. One, Angel, are your water bearer shirts for sale?
If you would like, I have all sorts of water bearer shirts.
Get a lot of money. Second, for anybody, regardless of how long you've been in the field, how would you describe the shift that you've seen in students, whether that's like K through 12 or in academia or otherwise, in the past like 10, 15 years, seeing water emerge as like an important concept? Have you seen kind of a vibe shift in importance among students? Are people responding better to water as a topic to study and care about? I'm just curious kind of what your outlook looks like in the water field.
So when I first started, like I'm only a very small portion of the water cycle, right? So I'm only resource recovery. I'm just taking care of it at the end. But when I first started, there was no intercommunication. Like it was, if you worked at the wastewater plant, if you weren't talked about, you were doing your job, which that is not the case. The public needs to know what we're doing. The public funds it. So there, I have seen a huge shift in probably the last 5 to 7 years where there's a lot more engagement with student bodies coming to the pollution control facility, the water resource recovery facility. So that is hopeful.
We're getting toward the end of time, so I think I saw another hand over here. So we'll go to that, but real quick, before you all leave, there's a QR code for feedback and a Mentimeter. So we're kind of interested in hearing from you all. What sort of big topics are of most concern to you? Did we miss anything in our conversation up here that you didn't share with us during this discussion? So please fill out that feedback. Is there anything else to add to that? Oh.
Scan it, think about it. It will still be there.
I saw a hand over here. Yes.
Yeah, mostly felt like conflicts. For any of you dealing with like multiple stakeholders or multiple communities, like are there any conflicts that are like commonly arising? Is there any like difficulties that you're finding in finding compromise? Or that I'll speak to it quickly, but other people might have other ideas. So I have been at ESF for about 3 years, but I came from West Virginia a long time. As a result, a lot of my research is still in Appalachia, where I can't really talk often about climate change, right? But my work is about climate change. And I'm not like lying to people and saying it's not about climate change, but I have to find kind of common language to get people to sit around the table together. And so people can talk about flooding and increasing risk of flooding all day long. And I have kind of made my peace with the fact that we don't have to call that climate change to do that work. And so like I have a project there where I have state partners from the state government, but community partners and emergency management people and like floodplain managers. And the lesson for me from that project is like we had to find the common words we could use and the common goals we had, knowing we also all had different goals, right? And stay focused on that central node so that we could work productively together. We don't all have to agree, right? But can we have like an anchor point around central goals? So that's specific politically, I think, to that context. And like some of those people very much want to talk about climate change and can't because of their position, right? Like in the state government, for instance, that's different in New York. But I think the lesson holds of finding common goals, staying centered on those goals, and learning, like just like the interdisciplinary conversation, learning each other's languages so you can find those common entry points and use it as a point of productivity.
Can I add something to that? Kind of another conflict that I think is important to point out, especially as researchers, is the conflicts between our research goals and then the goals of maybe sort of conservation or community interests. Those two are not necessarily going to be aligned. And it, comes down to very kind of practical things as well. So, this isn't necessarily water, but I have one site that I've been working at, the Albany Pine Bush Preserve, Albany, looking at how fire management is impacting like soil biogeochemistry. And when we were picking kind of our sites to study, right, we had our treatment sites that have received fire management, and we had our control sites, and then we picked them to be relatively close to each other so they could be good kind of like paired like control and treatment. But then when we met with the land managers, they were like, oh, one of these control sites we've actually started, doing mowing and like herbicide treatment so that we can start restoration there. And so we ended up having to move one of our control sites further out. And, we're dealing with an issue now, sort of in the publication process, very minor, where a reviewer's like, why is your control site so far away from all these other like sites? But it's just like the reality of like, when you work with community partners, especially who are engaged in conservation, that really your research goals related to working with them are gonna have to be secondary to those conservation goals, right? Like restoring that system and doing that invasive removal is more important than maintaining your like perfect control site for your random study. And so I think that as researchers working with community partners, especially when we are doing very like hypothesis driven research where we have treatments, where we have controls, we just have to keep in mind that our research goals are going to always be secondary to those conservation goals within those managed systems. And that is totally okay, because at the end of the day, we're doing the research to support those conservation efforts and to show like this is working or like this intervention works or whatever. So that's a conflict that I think is really important to keep in mind.
I think there's one more question. So I would like to know something that you would recommend, specifically based on your experience, that would be communicated to the public that maybe is a common misconception. Maybe it's something that not a lot of people know about, but it's something that you come across in your line of work where you're like, I really want everyone to know about.
I'm going to start. Those of you who have talked to me know what I'm about to say. Freshwater sponges exist and they're cool and they're exciting. If you're out in the water, look, just playing around flip over a rock, look for a freshwater sponge. They're a lot of fun, but I'll let more serious answers.
I mean, people want to engage. Like, I think that's what I found, that like community engaged work is time consuming and hard, but it's the most rewarding because I think people actually really want us to come and say like, how can I help you? How can my research support this? How can we have exactly the conversations that Jennifer was just outlining? So maybe that's not a surprise, but that's what I wanted.
I think proper septic maintenance.
understand that the water infrastructure in some cities is over 100 years old, and we need ratepayers to fix the infrastructure if you want to keep having water.
Microbes are just as charismatic as macros, or
Yep.
they are more metabolically diverse. And not all of them are bad. Most of them actually are quite good and are helpful to us.
For land and water, thinking about the nexus and conservation, I would say letting people or convincing people that if your lawns are converted to pollinator gardens with native shrubs, native grasses, you're doing a whole lot of habitat conservation. You're also helping with flood resiliency, and you're a lot cooler than like heavily manicured Kentucky grass lawns.
Yes.
So like hiring a whole bunch of behavioral scientists, which I've done a project like this before in Massachusetts, but doing it here and getting towns to flip so that you're only cool if you have the coolest pollinator garden. And that's where you should show off your wealth, is like, you know, how many native plants do you have? So, yeah.
That's kind of a hard note to follow. I have to say, like, never stop learning.
With that, let's thank our panelists again and thank Avery and Aaron.